Surprise! Whoa, you stand out from the pattern. You're not like the rest. You've got some differentiation going on. There's something unique happening here. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that surprising? Hello there, and welcome to Dharma Science Radio. My name is Ian, and I am here for the transformation of individual consciousness. For there is so much suffering on this world, and I believe that a significant portion of this suffering can be alleviated merely by shifting and even transforming the way we think, the way we perceive, and the way we see the world and our life and our relationship to life and this world. So our topic for today is authority. What is authority? Where does it come from? Where does it go? What does it do? Well, fundamentally, through the lens of human design, there are two basic types of authority. There is inner authority, which is how an individual learns to make decisions correctly as themselves. And there is outer authority, which is basically what becomes available to an individual following inner authority. And what outer authority does is it's able to cleanly share and communicate what that individual sees in the world. For the description of the mind's job through human design is fundamentally, number one, to observe life and the world. Number two is to measure what has been seen, to make calculations about it. And number three is to share those observations and measurements with the other in the format of outer authority, which is clean, which is clear, which is free from unnecessary bias. Notice how I use the word unnecessary in that bias, because there are degrees of bias we simply cannot be free from. We cannot get away from bias entirely. It's not possible. For you see, you have a completely different perspective in this life than I do, and I have a completely different relationship to life than you do. And as a result of our limited perspectives, there's a bias, and there's no escaping that. However, it does not have to be a bias that has been heavily influenced by energetic amplification and unnecessary transferred energies. Our communication can come through in a clear way, and fundamentally it's called outer authority, which is only available to a being who is in touch with, in tune with, and following their inner authority. And so one key factor about this inner authority, outer authority situation is what is enabled. And that's called respect. It's called honor. It's called grace. Because fundamentally, if I am able to honor my inner authority and communicate my outer authority, then I'm going to give you the same grace. I'm going to allow for you to make your own decisions correctly as yourself. And I'm going to allow you to speak your truth. And I'm not going to confuse your truth for my truth, and vice versa. That's what we're working towards, where I can communicate my truth, you can communicate your truth, and neither of us, ideally none of us, will become confused between the two. That we can all know how to make decisions correctly as ourselves and no longer get confused between what truly matters for the individual who is seeing the world and who is living their life. And so there's only a certain number of fundamental inner authority mechanisms according to human design. And we'll explore them now. So if you look over to my left here, you'll see that we have a body graph surrounded by this big old beautiful Dharma wheel. And so here in the center is the body graph with various energy centers. If you're new to human design, these are basically like the chakras from classical yoga, except the difference is now we have 9 of them. We've recognized 9 of these energy centers as being deeply important. No longer a simple pile of 7, one on top of the other. There is now 9 with a left and a right that are distinct from each other in a way that classical yoga did not recognize. And so the first authority that we're going to be looking at is called emotional authority. So that's this solar plexus center right here. And you'll see that I've colored in each of these channels emanating from this solar plexus center. If you have any of these channels defined in your body graph chart, that gives you emotional inner authority. The fundamental line for emotional inner authority is that there is no truth in the now. There is no truth in the now. That's very profound. It radically shifted my life because I happen to be an emotional inner authority being. And I used to study under Ram Dass, for instance, be here now. And while that is beautiful, it's not exactly what I'm capable of doing in the way that he might have meant it. For as an emotional solar plexus being, I exist over time. I exist over a wave of relative emotional clarity. And so it means that feelings are no substitute for clarity. Now, this is very important. If you have emotional inner authority, you have any of these channels here, the solar plexus automatically becomes your authority. It is the most dominant inner authority on the planet, and about 50% of the population has this inner authority. And so feelings are no substitute for clarity. It means that when I feel very deeply about something, whether that is feeling very high and wonderful and wow, this is incredible, I must have this, or if it's feeling very low and terrible and gloom and doom and everything is horrible, I don't know what to do, I have to get out, I have to escape, whatever it may be, those deep feelings are never a substitute for the clarity that is found by waiting. By having patience and allowing the wave or the spiral of the emotional energies to go through their cycle 1, 2, 3, 4 times, however many times it takes. The key is, as that spiral spins, as that wave flows, the emotional being is able to achieve different vantage points with very, very high resolution information at each of those points, which is why they can feel so deeply, is because there's so much information in this emotional field, it's hard to keep up. The only real way to keep up is to have some patience, is to breathe with it and discover the relative clarity that is found over time by triangulating from these different points of relative clarity that build up into a picture of, yes, now it's obvious. I don't have to think about it. My body has let me know. And it's a chemistry operation. It's not simply patience in order to think it through. The classical 7-centered human with its purely strategic tonal variable configuration was very interested in thinking everything through logically. Back in the day, the emotional solar plexus here was a pure motor. It had no capacity for awareness whatsoever. And so stoicism was very important, that ability to disengage and detach from our emotions and be rational. And that's beautiful, that has its place in the world. However, for the emotional solar plexus inner authority beings alive today, it'll never work. It simply doesn't work because there is chemistry going on within the physics and the biology of the body that need to be honored in order to truly find the signature vibration of the individual being. And so the strategy is to wait for that clarity. Deeply, deeply important. And so our next inner authority mechanism is that of the generator aura type. This is the sacral center, right here. If you have any of these channels defined in your body graph and you do not have an emotional solar plexus channel defined, this is very important, because even if you have this 59-6 coming out of the sacral into the solar plexus, that would give emotional inner authority, because the nature of the solar plexus is dominant on the earth. It's very powerful. However, if you do not have the solar plexus defined and you have any of these sacral channels coming out from the center, that gives you generated inner authority. And so what we know about the generator is the strategy of waiting to respond. Now, fundamentally, this is the key. This does not mean sitting down, staring at the wall, doing nothing, waiting for somebody to show up. For waiting is truly a process of being present and aware. Aware of what? In my opinion, the easiest thing to be aware of is your own breath. For the breath of a human being is perhaps one of the most important things to be aware of. If you are not breathing, soon you are dead. We can go without water, we can go without food, we can go without touch even, for quite a while. However, without breath, soon we are dead. And if we are paying attention to the flow and the rhythm and the smoothness or the jaggedness of our breath, that is a clue into the health of this being. And so by paying attention to your breath in this moment, you can feel what is happening in your body. Because beyond the breath itself, there is the body, this physical body that is doing the breathing, and the outer world, which is providing the oxygen to breathe. And so waiting to respond, that fundamentally means there is a binary here. There is yes, and there is no, Basically, the no can feel like a contraction in the gut, in the stomach. It can feel like repulsion. It can feel like being pulled away or going away from something or being constricted on the inside. And the yes, the can feel like expansion. It can feel like moving forward towards a thing. It can feel like lightening up from the inside out. Like, yes, this is good. This is where I'm going. This is satisfaction. And so with this generator aura type and this sacral authority, by trusting that gut feeling, by trusting the body to make its own decisions, this is still not about thinking things through like the classical seven-centered human being of days past. Here with the sacral authority, it's all about trusting the body's yes and trusting the body's no, not the mind's. And when the generator is able to trust their inner yes-no mechanism, their inner GPS, their guidance system, they're able to experience more consistently the signature vibration of satisfaction and get away from that field of frustration. And when I say get away from the field of frustration, I don't simply mean there's never any more frustration in life. It's always happy sunshine. It's not rainbows and butterflies all the time. The thing about satisfaction, however, is that it dissolves frustration. When you feel satisfaction for real in your body, you know what it is, because the frustrations and the bothers and the troubles aren't in your mind. They're not at the forefront of what's going on anymore. They've been pushed back. They've been dissolved into their basic elements and put back together into joy, into satisfaction, even bliss. And so by trusting that mechanism, the signature vibration has a chance to become the dominant frequency. And so about 70% of people have a defined sacral center. You know, there's a lot of channels coming out from this sacral that connect with 1, 2, 3, 4 different energy centers. And the thing is, this is where reality itself is being generated. This is where the life force of humanity and basically all of life is generated and regenerated from. You see, when a generator uses their energy correctly, when they trust their yes and no from the inside, from the body, then they can sleep well at night. They can get a good night's sleep, and they can regenerate that energy in order to go forward into tomorrow with the strength of somebody who's ready to do it all over again in a brand new context, in tomorrow's world. And so our next inner authority mechanism, if you do not have the solar plexus, if you do not have the sacral center defined, then any of these channels here will give you splenic authority. Now this is perhaps the third most common inner authority on the planet. You know, we're going in the order here, basically. And this splenic authority is very different from the other two. Most especially, it's very different from the solar plexus over here. In the solar plexus, as you remember, this was about there is no truth in the now. One must wait for clarity. Here in the sacral center, it's trusting the gut response, even in the moment. Boom, there's a yes or there's a no, and that's life. Trust it. Here in the spleen, things are a little bit different. Here in the spleen, there is essentially a voice or an instinct, an intuition, a taste. That is the guiding principle. Some may say it's a quiet voice. Some may say it's a loud voice. However, the key here is it only speaks once. Whereas with the emotional system, you're constantly feeling all this information you have to watch fly through you and move through you. And over time, it becomes clear what the truth is, relatively speaking. Over here in the sacral center, there is truth right now. You know, boom, always, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And if you don't trust that, frustration builds up. And it becomes the generated frequency that a lot of people have to deal with and amplify, and it really is not so much fun. Which is why it's so important for the sacral being to generate that satisfied frequency so that we can live on a satisfied life force. Over here in the splenic center, this isn't about generating anything. This isn't about waiting for clarity. This is about trusting the intuition, trusting the instinct, trusting the taste that comes through in the moment. And there's no reasonable, logical explanation for this beyond, well, quite simply the quantum field. The ability to honor and recognize the past, the future, and the present all exist within the present. And this spleen goes beyond ordinary, rational, logical thinking that says there was the past. Because of the past, we have the present. And what we do in the present determines the future. The splenic center goes beyond all that ordinary, rational thinking, and it knows beyond ordinary linear space and time. So a classical story that Ra-Uru-Hu, the pinnacle manifester of human design, has given for his life as a splenic authority is that many times when he would leave his house, he would get in his truck and he would start driving towards the city or wherever he's going, and he would not put on his seatbelt until he got off of his own property, until he got into the public roads. And one day he noticed his body putting the seatbelt on immediately when he got into the vehicle. And he noticed this. There wasn't a thought involved other than, oh, hey, isn't that interesting? That doesn't normally happen. And lo and behold, he gets T-boned right after turning out of the driveway. And so that's the key here. that the body has its own intelligence. You know, this splenic center was originally called the cleansing center. This is the first awareness center that has evolved on this planet. That ability to be present in the now and to clean oneself, to take care of oneself so that we can continue and go forward with a little bit less fear. And so by trusting that intuition, that instinct, that taste, that judgmentation, not the logical judgmentation, the body itself. It's got a taste of, ooh, I don't like that, or ooh, yeah, I like that. And, oh, I got a hit. Now I know that I am leaving this place, you know? Being able to trust those moment to moment, ping, oh, there it is, gotta go. This is life or death, quite literally. And so if you find yourself not with sacral authority, not with emotional authority, and yet with splenic authority, my deepest hope for you is that you will learn to trust that voice which only speaks once within you. And to witness the unfolding of a life radically different from anyone else's, because it's yours after all. That's what this is all about. And so our next inner authority is the ego authority. You know, this is the heart center, the center of willpower and values. This only has these two channels in the sense that if you have this 2644, that would define your spleen and you'd have splenic authority. If you had this 4037, you would have emotional authority because the solar plexus would be defined. However, this 2551 and 4521 go to the G center and the throat center. And essentially the ego, the willpower, the heart, is more dominant than either the sense of identity in the G and the center for transformation, which is never the authority. So this heart center, this ego center, this is one of four motor centers. You see this ego, this solar plexus, this root center, and this sacral center are the four energy centers that are responsible for movement on the physical plane. So all movement, all behavior, all muscles moving in the body, this has to do with those four energy centers alone. And this ego is about the willpower. Do you have the will to do something? Are you willing to put in the work? Are you willing to jump into something? That's what this is about. It's not about, can I think about this thing and convince myself that it feels good? It's simply about, do I have the will? Does my body get lit up by this? Do I feel good about doing this? Does this feel right? And so this ego center works for reward, fundamentally. The ego is very conservative with its energy. It does not wish to waste its energy on things that provide no reward. That is deeply, well, it's frustrating, it's angering, it generates bitterness. It's very disappointing. It's very upsetting to put in work and then to be told it wasn't good enough or it was a waste of time. That's not what the ego is here for. This ego is here to jump into the unknown, to put in the work, and to receive the benefit from that so that it can relax, that it can rest and have that chance to recuperate its energy. For it's not like the sacral center. It doesn't simply output, 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 output. Okay, I'm good. I'm going to rest and sleep for tonight and regenerate everything. The ego center can take a little bit more time. So one with ego authority might find that they need a lot of rest and that they can only output on certain things at certain times. And so being able to be present with that, being able to accept that they don't always have the physical push. This allows them to use their energy when they have it in a good way. So our next authority here is a complex of two different inner authority styles that are very similar to each other. Down here in the G center, we find self-projected authority. And up here in the Ajna center, we do not find mental authority. There is no such thing as mental authority. For the mind, the Ajna, is never the authority in the life. You see, the Ajna center, this thinking through the binary, left, right, up, down, forward, back, good, bad, this binary belongs to the wholeness of time itself. It belongs to all time, not necessarily an individual human being. And so these two are very similar in their function. I like to call them the complex inner authorities, because fundamentally what they're about is soundboarding. They're about communicating with other people and being able to hear oneself speak and listen to the way in which one speaks, what one has to say and how they have to say it. For you see, these projected and environmental inner authorities through the G center or through the Ajna, they really need to have that patience. They need to have that patience, and they need to have that ability to trust over time what they're hearing from themselves. So say you have one of these inner authorities and you're not sure what to do. You have a big decision of take the job or leave the job. What is the suggestion? It's fundamentally communicate with different people in your life. Talk about what you're thinking. Talk about the job. Talk about what life could be like without the job. Talk about your feelings, your intuitions, your judgments, your thoughts, and listen to yourself share your perspective. So this soundboarding process is much more about listening to what comes out of you than it is seeking advice from the outside. You know, that's the outer authority from the other in the ideal. And that can influence what comes out of you later on. However, if you allow the outer authority from the other to determine your inner authority, then you might find you're amplifying their energy and that you're off track in one way, shape, or form. And so by listening to what you have to say and how you say it and to whom you say it, you can gain awareness on the picture of your own life and your perspective, either your projected direction in life or your environmental projection of life. And by trusting that projection, you can actually find your inner authority by listening to what you say, how you say it, and to whom. And this is why it can be very important to speak with different people at different times. Of course, if you don't have multiple people to speak with, things can become a little challenging. Maybe you have to simply speak out loud to yourself and see what comes through. And at that point, it becomes very key to know what these open center, not self, mental amplification themes are. Because if you find yourself getting caught into, oh, I really need to do this because then other people will give me the validation I'm seeking, or other people will like me, or I can avoid problems if I do this, or I really need to get this done because I'm really busy and there's no time to think about this stuff and I really got to keep going and going and going. Or I need to hold on to this thing because if I let go of it, who knows what's going to happen to me? And I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I let go of the familiar. Or even not knowing when enough is enough, simply going crazy about these things, going in and in and in and in and thinking, think, and whoosh, crazy sauce. And so hopefully not. Hopefully, when you find yourself engaged in these various fields, that you can learn to see them and go, ah, my mind is amplifying something that doesn't belong to me. This is not my authority speaking. This is not my definition speaking. This is mental amplification speaking, which had its place, you know. It's deeply valuable that we have this capacity to amplify what we receive from others within our own systems. This is what allowed the classical seven-centered being to dominate the earth, is the fact that we could strategically amplify and work with all this stuff. However, nowadays there is a new system and there is a new way of making decisions correctly as a unique individual. Not a classical archetype, but a unique Uranian vehicle. And so our last inner authority for today is something that has been called no inner authority. However, I don't really jive with that. I believe everyone has inner authority, and personally, I believe even this outer world is within me. For this outer world that I see, hear, taste, touch, smell, interact with, exists within my relationship to it. You see, this world that I see is my reflection of the world. The world that you see is your reflection of the world. It's not the absolute truth. It's simply our interpretation, our perception of the truth. And that's why I believe by shifting and transforming our perspectives, by transforming our consciousness and expanding our awareness, we can alleviate the suffering on this planet. Imagine if everybody saw the entire world outside and around them as what exists within them. You know? All the people in this world are part of my world. It's my perspective. And all the people you see in the world are part of your world and your perspective. And so this inner authority type is called the lunar authority. This is trusting the moon. This is specifically for the reflector aura type. This is for people who have no definition within their body graph. You might have gates activated, like you could have this or this or this or this. Can't have that, because as soon as you have definition, you become some other aura type. Now you can't actually have that specific configuration from the planets most likely. However, we can see that there's gates activated and there's no definition. There's no channels fixing two energy centers together. And so this means that the reflector aura type, these people need to have a deep, deep sense of patience. Lunar authority is going through a 28-day cycle. You know, every month it's going through this cycle of activating each and every gate along the wheel. And what happens is that these reflectors, they get in touch with the program itself. You know, like the regularly scheduled programming, except for this isn't the program of human beings' mental determination and decision making. This is the program of life itself and the physics of the world in which we find ourselves. And so as the moon is going around the Dharma wheel, it lights up different energy centers and activates different gates. And it gives the opportunity for the reflector to get a taste of its own rhythm, which is quite a grand rhythm. It's said that the reflector is deeply personal with the program rather than other people. For you see, the polarity with the reflector is between disappointment, because, oh, another person who fits into the standard program, how uninteresting, you know? Oh, another disappointment. Oh, another one, another one, another one. And then on the other side of things, the signature vibration is, oh, surprise! Whoa, you stand out from the pattern. You're not like the rest. You've got some differentiation going on. There's something unique happening here. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that surprising? And so that's the signature vibration for the reflector. A reflector that can learn to live in their deeply expanded and stretched out perspective on life can learn to see how surprising this life really is. They can learn to exist within that surprise more often than the disappointment, to be surrounded by people who are different, doing things in their own way that stands out and sticks out from the conventional pattern. the conventional pattern of amplification and survival strategies and genetic reproduction that has been so important for us to get to this stage of human evolution, and yet now is deeply important to kind of take a step back from, to let go of a little bit, to detach from this need to mindlessly reproduce and survive. It's been very helpful for us to get here. And if we allow that impulse to run our life still, we might find that our lives are not as enjoyable as they could be. They're not as satisfying. They're not as peaceful. They're not as successful. And they're not as surprising as they could be. And so those are the fundamental forms of inner authority. Now, if you may remember from all the way in the beginning, there were two primary forms of authority on this planet according to human design. And they are inner authority and outer authority. We just went over all of the inner authorities, the correct ways for making decisions as unique individual beings. And the outer authority is what's available when a being is trusting their inner authority. So whether you're a reflector who's waiting for the moon to light things up and give awareness over time, whether you're emotional who really needs to breathe through their wave and trust these different points of information that eventually become clarity, whether you're a sacral authority who needs to trust that gut response in the moment, whether you're splenic authority who needs to really trust that voice which only speaks once, whether you're an ego authority who needs to really trust the energy that is available. Do I have energy for this? Is my willpower available for this or not? And whether you have a complex inner authority, such as the environmental or the self-projected, whether you need to soundboard with others and listen to your own voice speak. Each of these mechanisms is unique for the individual being. All I've shared is the generic, universal formulas. For you see, depending on which channel gives you these definitions, gives the criteria through which one can become even more aware of the mechanisms. Because it said this is all about seeing, seeing, seeing. We have 3 different centers that provide awareness in the mechanism. You know, it began with the spleen. This is about survival and cleansing from the dangers and the pain of the past. We have the ajna, which is all about communication and perception. The idea that you are distinct and different from me and I am different from you. I can remember my past, I can project into my future, and together we can make a plan to dominate the world. That was the ajna center. Now we have the third potential for awareness alive on the planet. We have a solar plexus center. We have this chance to hold on a second. I know we can remember the past and we can project in the future. I know we need to clean ourselves of the dangers of the world so that we can survive. However, I really need to wait. I need to be with my feelings and emotions until eventually they turn into clarity. And that's what it's all about. Being able to know how to make correct decisions as a unique, differentiating human being. And that's what's available to each and every one of us who is alive today. And I firmly believe that by trusting these decision-making mechanisms, we can reduce and alleviate a great deal of the suffering on this planet. And so that is my wish for you, to experience less suffering than ever before, to experience more satisfaction, more success, more peace, and more surprise than you ever could have expected. Because this life can go beyond our wildest dreams. You know, our mind has a limited perspective, whereas the whole cosmos itself, it's not limited, you know. There's fractal self-similarity. There's infinity, there's eternity, and it's available to us. And so that's all I have for today. If you'd like to learn more, feel free to click the link down below where you could sign up for a private session with me, and we can dive into all these details as they specifically pertain to you, and we can get in touch with the decision-making mechanism. Hopefully reduce some suffering on this planet, one person at a time. All right, take care. Bye for now. If you have enjoyed the show and would like to learn more about how all of this applies specifically to you, then kindly refer to the link in this video's description, Private Consultation. Here, we can dive into all of the details together in a recorded call. May your signature vibration of satisfaction, success, peace, and surprise find you in a good way.